Welcome back, everyone. My name is John Euler. Welcome to Journey to Healing. We are in the midst of a series on the topic of boundaries under the overall umbrella of grief and loss. The reason why boundaries are imperative if you're going to heal from the past is you have to bring things down to a low ebb in the current day so that you can also begin to heal in the past. On part one of this program, or just before the break, we were looking at what are the issues under all the mental health issues, all the counseling related issues, and the issues under the surface really are anger and loss, and under loss is anger. So you can really boil everything down that we wrestle with to the issue of anger. It is okay that we're angry. We have to know it, and we also have to know that it's okay to be angry. If you're familiar with the Bible, with the New Testament, Paul says, be angry and sin not. It is not sin to be angry. Anger just is. It's neither good or bad. Where did anger come from? It came after the fall. But the question is this: did we have the capacity for anger prior to the fall? Well, only if we were made in God's image. What do we mean by that? Did God have the capacity for anger prior to Lucifer rebelling? Yes, he did. But none of the angels had ever seen that. Why? Because there hadn't been any transgression. There hadn't been any willfulness. There hadn't been any ego. There hadn't been any injustice. And once that happened, the capacity that was already there now was kicked into gear, and now we have something that is designed to help us with that anger. Really two things. One, there's a process that we go through, and we call that the grief process, to deal with issues of loss, because that is what's behind anger. Also, the encroachment upon self. We are made in God's image. We are the highest act of His creation. We are valuable because we exist. We don't earn the right to be valuable. We are valuable in and of ourselves prior to birth. Forget cradle to grave. Long before the cradle, during the 9 months of gestation, we are not a fetus. We are a small little person. Yes, it's called a fetus, but the sanctity of life is crucial. Why? Because the moment you objectify life, the moment you sanitize life from its humanity, now you are objectifying it, and now you become the arbiter of whether or not that person, regardless of size or age or ability to contribute, and that's the essence of socialism, by the way, it dehumanizes people. So it takes the fruits of their labor because they're not special, and therefore they don't have the right to keep what is theirs. So godless capitalism is different than godly capitalism. A godly heart will always be charitable, and that's the way we care for one another. We are our brother's keeper. Government isn't, because government is filled with people, and they will work power towards one another. So, but the issue of boundaries is absolutely crucial in the issue of counseling and our well-being. Why? Because once the fall happened, once we became selfish by nature, so from a Christian perspective, Judeo-Christian perspective, biblically, we call that the Adamic nature coming from Adam. We call that our fallenness, our sinful nature, whatever you want to call it. There is a willful part of us that doesn't have to be trained. It just is. Ask any parent of a child that gets old enough, and oftentimes they call that the terrible twos. Why does it make it so terrible? Because now you have a little mobile child that's starting to be able to feel free to say to the most significant people, loving people ideally, authority figures in their lives, they look way up and they say what? When boundaries have been set, the child will say no. The child does not have to be taught to disobey. That is within the human heart. Therefore, that little principle within us will have a tendency, the natural default position is to want to become like the little fourth member of the Trinity. I want to be king of the castle. And so we have to help kids understand that the world does not revolve around them. So we help train the children in what respect? We bring them under control. So we break their will. It's not a heart that, it's like a wild horse. You bring that horse into a useful state where it now doesn't need to be ridden in a rough fashion. As a matter of fact, those that work with horses, you can just whisper, right? We're fascinated by the horse whisperer, that horse that weighs 3 or 4 times the human being is willing to be brought under control. So that's the idea of parenting. So we civilize the little savage beast. So when you have people that come together, there's going to be that tendency, that natural, and it's not healthy, that natural tendency to cross boundaries. So to presume. When that happens, there are 2 mechanisms in play that God has instilled within us to correct that. That is our conscience and our intuition. Our conscience is designed to keep us on our side of someone else's boundaries. Okay, let me say that again. Our conscience is designed to keep us in check. Our intuition is designed to kick in if somebody else isn't going to listen to their conscience. So you wouldn't need intuition if everybody was listening to their conscience. But because not everybody's willing to listen to their conscience, then we need to know when that is or isn't taking place. And there's 2 concepts that in the book of Galatians, in chapter 6, it uses to describe what is in play all the time that our conscience and our intuition will detect. And I'm going to bring our little guy up here and where's my picture? I'm still getting used to the tech end of things. So there's my little picture. Okay. So Paul says that everybody should carry their own load. We need to own our responsibility. So that's the Greek word for load, the little knapsack there. What is in that knapsack? It's certainly, owning our responsibility to do normal things, pay the bills and things like that. But it's much more than that. It has to do with how I treat people. That comes out of Proverbs chapter 1 and chapter 2, 3,000 years ago. So when Paul says each man should carry his own load, there is never a reason why, and there's never an excuse not to carry our responsibility. And what does that look like in relationship, in a healthy relationship? It looks like that. I'm learning how to do this. So there we go. So that's a healthy relationship. Everybody is owning their own stuff. But what happens if people do not? Well, you then will have somebody that does this. They will take their load and dump on someone else. So the little guy on the right, and this is gender neutral, my stick figures. So we have the person, so this could be either gender and any age. So the person on the right has now dumped their responsibility on the person on the left. So he has a little green knapsack, and he decides that he is going to care more about himself than someone else. He's not going to do what is right, just, and fair. And now he transfers his responsibility onto the other person. I recommend you go back and look at some of the podcasts, especially How Big of a Pig, and you'll see this. If this relationship continues, then we're going to start to have the piling on effect. And eventually, what's going to happen? We're going to have, as soon as I can find it here, we're going to have our little guy that looks like that. And we're going to now look at what is a predatory relationship. Before we do that, here's the other issue in play as far as what we should or shouldn't be carrying. When we look at issues of boundaries, as a matter of fact, I'm going to get my act together. There we are. Okay, I'll get rid of that. Now, there's 2 things that we end up carrying. One that we're not supposed to carry alone, that's called a burden. That is the result of living in a fallen world. Okay, so in this life, we will have difficulties, things that happen to us that are now ours, such as the death of someone close to us. We are not designed to carry that. So we need to allow someone to come alongside us and carry that. That is different than the issue of our load. That we are never to give away. So unless I understand the difference, I will end up, I'll end up feeling as though I'm under a pile. And that's when people start to seek out counseling. So when they cannot discern the difference between a knapsack and a load, then they end up being heavy laden. Now, we have used the idea, as a matter of fact, here's a good little meme here. So if I end up carrying a lot of stuff, we call that emotional baggage, especially in a family. And the question is this: if you're tired of carrying it around with you, why aren't you putting it down? And if you continue carrying the family baggage, how long could you keep doing that? Now, to bring you up to speed, we have looked at the relationships that continue to dump. And we have looked at really in the concept of a mountain where we're supposed to progress upwards in terms of character development. And if I don't, then I will end up going downhill, because nobody ever stays the same. They either get better or bitter, and better or worse. And so ideally, we're moving upwards in terms of character. We're moving toward a 10. But the question is, with those in our lives, are they also moving upward, or are they starting to move downward? And here's the thing that most people don't understand, that there is by nature a downward progressive pull, that once you get into the negative, it will start to increase the dynamic. It's like jumping into Niagara Falls. So what I have done with the little mountain picture, let me find what I am referring to quickly. When you look at the hillside, I've got all these. Okay, I'm going to try to find the little hill. I'm going to superimpose. Okay, look at the background. There we go. So this is a foggy valley. And I now have my little people here with the knapsacks. Okay, this is the best way to view this concept, because you don't want to go into the fog. Nothing good happens when you start to go into the fog with negative people, with people that are selfish. If you do, you will inevitably regret it, because selfish people will try to take you for a ride, and they're going to take you down into that fog layer. But there's something that happens in the fog that we're not aware of oftentimes. And what happens is this. We start, instead of moving upward, let me get rid of my, I need a producer, huh? Okay. So instead of moving upward, and you'll see the bottom term there, reasonable relationship. And you notice over on the left-hand side, I have inverted that positive and negative scale. So we've just kind of inverted the picture, but same concept. So if I am not moving upward with a healthy relationship, and what does a healthy relationship look like? It looks like two people walking together, each carrying their own responsibility. There will be times that somebody gets a little more tired, and so we reach out and we're going to help them. That's a normal relationship, and people then are on the path and they are moving upward. But the moment somebody begins to get off the path or dump, what happens is we begin to look like that. And eventually, that kind of dynamic, if you don't have boundaries and you cannot speak the truth, then eventually, what do you look like? Well, you look like everybody's chauffeur. That's what you look like. And you're getting all burned out. Why? Because they are taking you, in one way or another, those people are taking you into the fog. So instead of moving upwards toward growth, while each person carrying their load, what begins to happen? Well, one way or another, we start to get off the path. So if we stay on the straight and narrow, that's going to lead toward character growth. But it's interesting, in Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24, it says this: "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Show me my anxious thoughts." So here we have the path of anxiety. If it gets too hard, in my estimation, to keep on this path, because sometimes the path, you notice it goes up and then over, we don't know where that's going to go. And what happens if I fear that may lead me through the valley of the shadow of death? that I may have to face some difficult things. Well, then I'm going to be too fearful, and then I'll take matters into my own hands, and I will rewrite Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, which says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, meaning stay on the path, and he'll direct your path. What happens? I take matters into my own hands because I'm too fearful, and then I get out somewhere on my own. David says this, search me, O God, know my heart, show me my anxious thoughts. So there's the path of anxiety. How did I get off the path and started taking matters in my own hands? He says, show me my anxious thoughts or my hurtful ways. If I am hurtful, the question is why? What brought that about? And it is my ego. So my selfishness then will kick in if I don't keep it in check, and there's a little path, and he's gonna take the shortcut. He's gonna do it his way. He's probably singing Frank Sinatra's song all the time. And so, meaning he does it his way. And so what happens is you will have someone who ends up getting together with somebody at a lower level. And so I have the little stick figures reversed if you look at the picture of the path. So I have on this picture of the path over on the right-hand side, picture of ego on the left. It doesn't matter. We can switch them. So here you have somebody, and they're walking side by side through life, but the person on the right is actually taking them lower and lower as they continue to dump. And so what happens is, the way to understand anxiety, if I can bring my little picture back, is that you have somebody who is violating their intuition. So the person, the path of ego, he's violating his conscience. So he has dumped his responsibility over on to the other person, and that begins to do that downward descent. Okay, so let me bring that picture back. So the moment the dumping takes place, both of them are off the path. The path of ego happens when the person takes his responsibility and dumps it. There we are. Okay, so the moment that dumping starts, the ego person is going to give his responsibility to the other person. The question is this: why doesn't the person say enough? Because they are fear-based. So what starts to happen is they end up descending together. They're going lower. Really, the selfish person is bringing the other person down. And where are they going? They are going, if I can bring this, they are going down into the fog. And you don't want to go into the fog. Why? Because something happens when you go into the fog. And the responsible person, they start to go through their own metamorphosis, which is their vision gets clouded, and then they start to become under an illusion that the person is going to change. Then they become deluded, and that's when the mind games start. This person, if I can bring this up here, matter of fact, this person is deluded, right? The person that has all the knapsacks, the question is, why are they staying in that relationship? Here's another relationship. Why is that person, remember, they got all the people hanging on the truck. What is that about? Well, if it was by choice, that's one thing. Right, but the question is it really by choice, or is something going on to where now, instead of, let me get rid of the party of people on the truck. Okay, what's happening is this. The person, instead of moving upward, and you see the terrace, not terrorist, you see the terrace, that's actually a picture out of China, going step by step downward. They should be moving upward, right? In what way? Here's a healthy relationship. They should all be moving upward. But what's happened is, because of the dumping, so we've got more and more knapsacks going on, right? There, it's taking the person further and further. And so I wanted to show the inversion. You can see, again, the scale on the right. Well, you see the scale on the right. So I'm now going to change pictures. We're going to get rid of the scale so we can begin to look at what happens. Let me get rid of the dump over there. So the inevitable progressive descent into the fog with a selfish person. So it starts with, it begins to become an unreasonable relationship, then it will transition into an unhealthy relationship, then into a toxic relationship, eventually into a predatory relationship. What does a toxic relationship look like? And eventually a predatory relationship, it looks like this. And the description is that despite its appearance, there is no way this is a relationship, but simply an opportunity for a professional grade manipulator, deceiver, and personality disordered individual to take from you as much as you're willing to give, to feed off of you, to turn you into a shell of yourself and to use you for all you're worth, and then play you for a fool, and to demean you and inflict pain upon you for their sadistic sense of satisfaction. By the time you are this low, and you have that kind of, now again, look at there we go. Those are our little people there in a bigger scene, okay? They'll pull you downward as low as you're willing to go, and as low as you're willing to descend with them. To them, you've simply become an object to be used for their selfish whims and ends. So what does that look like? It looks like, first of all, that you are staying longer than you should. I'm going to get rid of our little picture here if I can find it, okay? They're morphing. Do you remember the twisting effect? Go back and watch some of the previous podcasts. Over on the far right-hand side, see the stages? Those are the stages of a fool that a fool will take me through. Quickly, here are those stages. We've looked at those previously, but again, they begin to control you, begin to assume control over you, mentally, emotionally, and enslave you. Stage 2, they take advantage of you. This comes out of 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 19 and 20, by the way. Paul says, this is not spiritual to be with this kind of person. So they take advantage of you, prey upon you, take everything you have, they devour your substance, so they're bleeding you dry. They're deceiving you. Now we're transitioning into the third stage. They take full advantage of you to get the better of you by deceit and to catch you in a net. That's when they've got you. Now they're going to take control of everything, and to the outside world, including your family, your church, others, they're going to make you look like the bad guy, that you have the issues. They have now taken over your life, and now you're in the ultimate catch-22. And now what will they do? They will slap you in the face and strike you in the face. Number one, if you're in a physically abusive relationship, you need to get out. But that is not the only way that somebody can slap you in the face. They can demean you. This is not turn the other cheek time. This is you are rolling in the mud with a pig. You should never be around this kind of person. Those who do not move do not notice their chains. And that's why the pig doesn't want you to begin to ask questions, and they don't want you to have your intuition. So going back to, if you descend out of a desire to be helpful, to be nice, and I recommend the podcast, The Myths We Believe, okay, you are not going to bring someone up. Now, we are to be tolerant of, and we're to be helpful, and we're to be useful. We are to help and bear with difficult people, but we are not to begin to descend to their level. We aren't to make them comfortable. We're not to be offensive, but we are to always do what? We're to always call somebody up to a higher level. If you go down, what'll happen is this: they're going to take you further into the mist. So you see the larger words right in the middle, those are those stages. And then remember the twisting zone. Over on the left, you have the 5 stages of emotional abuse and enslavement. I just read those. Those are the morphing stages, really what the fool or the pig or the dog, those are all biblical terms, what they do to you. So the manipulation of presumption comes first. Then they use and exploit you. They isolate and ensnare you. They isolate you from your family and friends. Do not let someone isolate you from your family and friends. That is a sure sign of someone who does not have the best of intentions. They want to control you. There's step 4, control and enslaves, and then abuse you for sport, for their power and their control. Okay, so over on the between the predatory relationship and toxic relationship, things start to morph, and that's probably in about a -4. So by the time you are descending, again, this is what we're looking at, but I'm just inverting it and adding some topography. So once it gets to a toxic relationship, you're now dealing with a narcissist. What is a narcissist? The more sophisticated they are, they don't need a mirror. It is just someone that is full of themselves. Okay, so a narcissist is, some people say it's a specific kind of person. That is not true. Somebody who morphs into and allows for their selfishness to grow will become narcissistic. The smarter they are, you won't notice it, but they're all about self. That is a narcissist. Now, once it transitions to the 4 and -4, now you're dealing with malignant narcissism. Okay, that's where you'll see a lot of memes and things written. All of them are very good about what a narcissist is. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have some for next time. Okay, but malignant narcissism, that's the mother gothel. That's the first stage. Then the sociopath. That is where the person will use you for all you're worth, and they will bleed you dry. And eventually it transitions into a psychopath, or what's called biblically a reprobate mind, which comes out of the world of metallurgy, which simply says that person's substance and essence is no longer useful for what it was intended. That has to do with the mind. The mind will go through a twisting process the further someone goes into selfishness. Instead of loving people and using things, what will they do? They will end up using things and, loving things and using people. And that's when there's no turning back. By the time somebody gets to that point, and did I bring that? Why is there a point of no return? Well, the better way to describe that is this. Okay, the point of unlikely return. Now, actually, these could be scrunched together a little more. Okay, but as somebody morphs, there's the pig. So as they're turning into a pig, so instead of getting into the mud, you need to dust your sandals off at this point in time. But they're losing the interest in, this pig is losing the interest in ever being any other way than they are. That's what's going on. So we can say there is a point of no return, but the best way to think about it is the person is losing, the pig, as they're morphing into super hog, okay, they're losing any desire to be any other way than they are. And so if you stay with somebody who is going to continue to grow and morph into a greater type of pig, then you will experience exactly what Jesus is trying to save you from when he says, do not cast your pearls before swine, lest they do what? Lest they trample your pearls and then harm you and then turn on you. So much needless pain, so much needless hurt. The flip side of her is anger. Anger will do what? Show itself in all the different mental health issues, all the different counseling issues. So we will be looking at more in depth, what are the characteristics of the narcissist, the sociopath, the psychopath, the white-collar psychopath, meaning the sophisticated pigs. We will look at that on the next edition of Journey to Healing.
You've been listening to Journey to Healing, sponsored by SurvivorSupport.net. We trust you've been helped by the information our host, John Euler, has shared. To donate to this ministry, schedule a personal consultation with John, or to arrange a professional training for your church or organization with John, simply visit our website. On behalf of Survivor Support, we look forward to hearing from you and to have you join us next time on Journey to Healing.